Greetings everyone and welcome. I'm your host Captain Ryan. Today's video comes to us courtesy of Storm Surge Alpha. Storm Surge is playing in the Tier 9 German cruiser Roon here in World of Warships. Now, as the battle gets underway, it's domination mode, and Storm Surge has spawned closest to the central cap on this map, the big cap point, but has decided wisely not to rush it. Now that central cap is quite exposed on this particular map, and generally speaking early on it's not advisable to go there. Even if you're a destroyer, you're really asking for trouble. So instead Storm Surge is going to head off towards the A cap. Now that means heading the long way around, again because of the exposed situation that is that central location and the lack of entrances to the A cap point. The good news is he's not alone in this maneuver, as he's got several friendly ships, including a battleship up here with him. Enemy Harbor Ops pops up there. He's got himself wide open and exposed here, and is taking quite a bit of fire. Gets a big ol' hit there from one of the cruisers, and he's got a wall of skill coming towards him. Granted, it's a Harbor Ops. He's got quite the maneuverability and is probably going to manage to avoid most of this damage, at least lasting. And the reason I say that is because, as you can see, he's not popping a smoke screen. He just keeps firing and he keeps running away. Since he's not popping a smoke screen, it probably means he's running the heal consumable as opposed to the smoke. Storm Surge switches over to the high explosive, a good option here for the Harbor Ops, especially considering the Roon and its rate of fire, which is pretty reasonable for a Tier 9 cruiser. It is basically the Hindenburg minus one gun turret. So you have 9 of those rapid-firing 8-inch guns. The high explosive, because it's German high explosive, is not as good as, say, the Japanese high explosive or the French high explosive, but the armor piercing is quite good, and even though the Harbor Ops has disappeared, Storm Surge does manage to connect and does manage to knock something out. Hopefully that was a permanent disabling of something important to that Harbor Ops, because we all know how obnoxious that destroyer can be. Friendly team has pushed into the A cap point and they are capping it. Enemy team is in the process of capping both B and C, but as you can see, they got really close to taking the B cap point, and then somebody went ahead and stepped on the B cap point, and they are preventing the enemy team from taking it. And they managed to kill the destroyer, the cheeky little bastard, that was in the B cap point, capturing it. I really wish I'd see more players, more cruisers, more destroyers, and more battleship captains take that initiative and push in and challenge the caps and go ahead and take advantage of destroyer captains who simply try to pop a smoke screen and wait you out. And in this case, Storm Surge's team did just that, and that destroyer captain paid the price. The enemy team has also now lost a cruiser as well, and yet another cruiser. So they're really down on points at this point. The friendly team way up here, and with the enemy team capturing C, they are going to start gaining points, but with this kind of momentum, hopefully Storm Surge's team can maintain the advantage here and continue to push forward. Now, what needs to happen, given the position of the enemy team, especially their concentration around the C cap point, is the destroyers need to push up into the B cap point, secure it, and then set out on either of the flanks and hold against those battleships, hold against the cruisers, hold against the destroyers. But as we can see here, friendly North Carolina gets taken out partly because he continued to push up into the channel. He took a lot of fire and didn't break contact. If you find yourself in this situation in a battleship, ask for a smoke screen. Or, better yet, simply stop pushing up, push into an island, block the line of fire for as many of those ships as you can, and then just focus down the ones that are still shooting at you. Storm Surge has finally started pushing up through the A cap point towards the B cap point. And as we can see here, the enemy team has managed to almost flank around the C cap point to the north end of the map. Again, this goes into concentrating your firepower and effort. Right now they've got an enemy Yamato who was effectively broadsiding, and not a lot of people were shooting at him, which is a little bit disappointing. Enemy Des Moines there pops up, and he's basically running away. He was broadside on there, and the Des Moines, very dangerous cruiser for any ship because of its high rate of fire and its decent armor piercing there. The good news is he's more concentrated on running away from any situation than anything else. There is the enemy Khabarovsk, has popped up once again, and surprisingly enough, he's quite isolated back over here, but doing what the Khabarovsk does best, setting people on fire and pissing them off. He's managed to set Storm Surge on fire. Now, Storm Surge pops his catapult fighter, gets that up there. Remember, it's a cruiser catapult fighter, which means it'll stay up for nearly 6 minutes. And honestly, pro tip, if you have this aircraft available on your cruiser, if you don't have to choose between it or radar, put it up fairly soon in the battle because it lasts 6 minutes. And the cooldown time is not terrible if it gets shot down, and it can provide you additional torpedo protection and additional range in detecting destroyer and cruiser captains, especially destroyer captains who forget to turn off their anti-aircraft. Storm Surge is really out for this Khabarovsk, and it makes perfect sense. He's the only one who's really in a position to shoot at this guy. And given that the rest of that Khabarovsk's team is basically back behind the C cap point, he's isolated, which gives Storm Surge the opportunity to effectively chase this guy down and finish him off. Now, the Khabarovsk did put that fire out finally, but Storm Surge manages to set yet another one, and so now this guy is basically burning down in spite of his best efforts. Plus, another friendly destroyer who was shooting at him, but of course the Khabarovsk takes out the Kagero, who tried to steal the kill here. So, at this point, the enemy team is now up. They're up on points, and they have the ship advantage, the ship lead. Hopefully, though, they won't have the destroyer advantage for very long, as Storm Surge finally gets those last shots to connect and takes the Khabarovsk out of play. And not a moment too soon as he starts taking fire in from other enemy ships back behind those islands. The Storm Surge drops off detectability, he's no longer being spotted, gets himself turned around, he's going to use this island for cover. Very smart play here. And it's going to be smart play that's going to win this game. It's not just that you should focus down and kill everything that moves. It certainly is one way to win the game. Playing intelligently, instead of chasing down enemy ships, instead of sailing broadside out in the open because you're so desperate for that kill, but instead playing smart, playing to maintain as much of your health as possible by using things like islands, by not firing, by putting up your catapult fighters to help spot, is what keeps you alive longer, helps you continue the battle, and gives you an advantage at the end of the game when you have to think about who else is out there and how much health they have and whether or not you can effectively challenge them. Now at this point, Storm Surge's team is in a really, really good position. They have themselves clustered up nicely in the B cap point for supporting fire. The enemy team only has one destroyer, so the risk of torpedo spam is minimized. It still exists, but it is minimized. Plus, the enemy battleships that are up north of the sea cap point, they're all relatively low health, and with a concentrated combined effort, they should be able to burn down or citadel some of these ships, like that Yamato, like that Iowa who was going broadside there. Now Storm Surge is trying to set that Yamato on fire with his high explosive. Is he going to be able to connect there? His rear turrets do manage to get out there, and he does manage to set a fire. The only question is that fire going to continue to burn, or is that Yamato going to immediately hit his R key and put it out? And it looks like, nope, he hit his R key and he put it out. That's a little bit unfortunate, because that's a smart thing for the Yamato to do, as he's got an island between himself and the rest of Storm Surge's team, which means he's not going to risk being immediately set back on fire. Now Storm Surge, though, does have a bit of a problem, as he's got another battleship over here, half strength from North Carolina. North Carolina, big 16-inch guns, and fairly accurate. The question is, who does he bow tank towards, the North Carolina or the Iowa and the Yamato? Well, the Iowa and the Yamato are both north, and they're both otherwise engaged. So, Storm Surge wisely chooses to bow tank against the North Carolina, and not a moment too soon does he get turned and narrow that target profile, does the North Carolina decide to take a shot at him. Unfortunately, all of the shots miss. But it looks like Storm Surge is dealing with shots coming in from that Des Moines. And you can tell it's the Des Moines based on the high angle of the shell shot coming over the island and the high rate of fire when those shots are coming through. Now, it kind of looks like that Des Moines took a bit of a blind shot there, did manage to connect, which is a little bit surprising. But there's also another cruiser back there who has, surprisingly enough, not yet been spotted in this game, or hasn't been spotted in quite some time, and that's the enemy Ibuki. And we're going to see this guy shortly. Now, Storm Surge pops his hydroacoustic, and there's the Ibuki, who's wandered into the range of his hydroacoustic. But this, again, is another example of when you have a catapult fighter to go ahead and use it. Yeah, there's a lot of anti-aircraft around, and catapult fighters probably going to get shot down really quickly. But before it does, at the very least, you can spot all of the enemy ships that have their anti-aircraft guns on within that 10-kilometer range, and you can see who's out there. Now, Storm Surge is lying in wait here. He's trying to get his torpedoes off as this Ibuki and as this North Carolina push around this island. The Roon does have torpedo tubes on each side. I believe it's only got one on each side. And they're 6-kilometer torpedoes. They do quite a bit of damage. Something to think about. Of course, in this particular case, both the Ibuki and that North Carolina turning hard and away. So they're probably going to get out of range of those torpedoes before they can strike home, which is a little sad. Speaking a little sad, the enemy team has managed to rally. They've managed to basically kill the remaining survivors at the B cap point, and now there are just 2 ships left on Storm Surge's team. Storm Surge himself and a friendly battleship, and both of them are in the same location. Incidentally, if they coordinate and communicate, both of them should be able to reasonably deal with the situation at hand. There is that Des Moines up here who is basically trying to run away. He sees a Storm Surge pushing up into the sea cap point, but he's not having it because he's got less health than Storm Surge does, and he also doesn't have torpedoes like Storm Surge does. Of course, he's got his radar going, so Storm Surge is going to continue to be spotted here, and those shots coming in from the North Carolina, coming in from the Yamato to the north, to the south, all around him. But he manages to avoid getting hit, which is very good here. Uses his repair to get his health back up to full strength here in the waning moments of the battle so that he can maintain it. And he's continuing to cap the C cap point. Now, the Des Moines pushes into the B cap point to try and take it. And I'm actually surprised that Des Moines opted to do that rather than push in and stand on the B cap point and let the Yamato or the Ibuki or North Carolina push up and take the B cap point. Because as it is now, Storm Surge's team still gaining points. The enemy team not gaining any points in spite of having the ship advantage here. They are way down on points. Almost a 200 point difference here, nearly a 300 point difference as Storm Surge's team continues to gain those points. Now Storm Surge is not in a position to assist the battleship on his team dealing with that North Carolina. He's got an island between himself and the friendly ship. This is a serious problem because that friendly ship is taking fire from at least 2 different things, including that North Carolina, but also that Ibuki. And unfortunately, the North Carolina takes out the friendly Izumo. The good news is, the Izumo secondaries managed to set that North Carolina on fire before he got sunk. And so, any moment now, that North Carolina is going to burn down. Izumo gets tis but a flesh wound, and that just leaves a 1 versus 3. But there for a brief minute, it was a 1 versus 4 situation. And look how many points Storm Surge's team has. They're in the 900 points range. Again, this is almost a 300 points difference. And they still have 2 of the caps, which means they're gaining points at a very, very rapid rate compared to the enemy team's 1. Additionally, there's not a lot of time left in this match. Just over 2 minutes. All Storm Surge has to do is survive. That's it. He doesn't have to go seeking glory. He doesn't have to kill a bunch of ships. All he has to do is survive. Enemy Yamato pops up. Enemy Yamato, very, very low health here. Yamato is going to take shots, and he does manage to connect there. Big hit, not enough to kill Storm Surge, which is good. Now Storm Surge gets his starboard torpedoes off at the Yamato, but the Yamato is going to suspect them. And so he's going to go ahead and start turning hard in, and those torpedoes are unfortunately going to miss. Again here, situation, when you're in this kind of situation, put that catapult fighter up. You could have spotted that Yamato just a little bit sooner, would have helped you maybe get into cover a little bit quicker. Now the Yamato steps on the sea cap point, starts taking it, but at this point, it's too little, too late. There's the 1,000 point marker for Storm Surge, who earns himself an award I have never yet received, the Solo Warrior. Disappointingly low damage game, but smartly played. 46,000 damage done in that game. Solo Warrior medal, only 1 ship killed and 1 base captured. But overall, a very, very well played game, not just by Storm Surge, but by the rest of his team as well, for concentrating together and basically defending, forcing the enemy team to stay in the back there. Top ship on the friendly team at 2,400 base XP was the Des Moines, with Storm Surge in the room, number 2 on the team. Surprisingly enough, the Yamato scored 2,000 base XP on a loss. Really disappointing for him. He had a lot of kills there. Anyway, that's it for today's video, folks. If you like the video, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, leave a comment down below. If you'd like to get semi-regular channel news and updates, you can do so by liking and following me on Facebook. If you've got a replay like this one that you'd like to see featured on my channel, you can send it to my email. If you'd like to help support me in the channel, you can do so by becoming my supporter on Patreon. Every dollar helps. And if you'd like to watch me play various games live, albeit intermittently, you can do so by following me on Twitch. You can find the links for all of those in the video description down below. And as always, I'll see you next time. This is Captain Rye, signing off.